Welcome back to another great episode of hashtag Screw the W2. And if you've been, following me for the last couple of years, you've probably noticed that with hundreds of people I networked with 2 years ago in Belize with Real Estate Guys Summit on Sand, there's been, shall we say, quite a pipeline of entrepreneurs, investors that have wanted to bring on the show. But when there's only 52 weeks in a year and you network with two, three, four, 500 people, it kind of takes a while to go through them. So with that, today's guest, Amy Novotny. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
You bet. Now, whereabouts are you calling or joining us from, Amy?
I'm in Utah right now, just a little bit southeast of Salt Lake City.
Okay, gotcha. So,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Well, now this is kind of like I said off camera. It's kind of the similar talk track that I have to, all my guests that I bring on the show. But maybe for starting off, can you maybe take us back in time? What was your previous, W-2 job? What was it? What
Mhm.
was it like? Or, what was an average day like?
Yeah, sure. So, previously I have a doctorate in physical therapy, so I worked as a physical therapist, and I worked 9 hour days, an hour lunch, and I just treated patients,
Okay.
a couple an hour, sometimes three, most of the time two an hour, and it just one after another all day long. And you finish up with those patients, and you do notes for the day, you go home, and you repeat 5 days
Okay.
a week.
Gotcha. Rinse and repeat day after day.
Mhm. Absolutely,
Uh,
yes.
All right. Now
Yeah.
with that, I'm not sure, maybe you can share how long you
Mhm.
were you know, with that company or with that in that position. But what was like, was there a certain moment that sticks in your mind? It's like, I don't think this is for me. I want to do something different. I want to be an entrepreneur. Or what was that, thought process like?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little bit different than probably the general person that goes into being an entrepreneur. I worked as a physical therapist for about 5 years, and I started working on developing the technique that I use now with a nervous system approach.
Okay.
And so I still stayed in a physical therapy position
Okay.
for a few more years while I was developing this approach and working through this approach.
Gotcha.
And at the same time, I felt like I was becoming stagnant in the sense that I was pushing through, I was developing this approach, but I wasn't getting a lot of support
Mm,
from my boss and the medical community because it was something new. It was different from what they were expecting. But at the same time, I had a few people that believed in me and were trusting me. So it was doing two things at once where I had a big push, a resistance against what I was doing, plus this a little bit of support. And so
hmm.
as I was going through that, I was becoming known for the technique that I use now and that I've developed over years. And people started getting to know me, and I started becoming known for helping people out of major surgeries, whether it was
Okay.
back surgeries, neck surgeries, rotator cuff repairs, trying to get people to avoid them, as well as knee replacements. And this
Okay.
leads to your answer to your question. So back in the beginning of 2018, a world famous photographer contacted me and
Okay.
said he wanted to fly in from Florida. At that time, I was in Arizona and work with me to help him avoid a knee replacement surgery. And he was in his 70s.
Okay.
And he had had chronic pain for 40 years throughout his body, especially his knees.
Jeez.
He was bone on bone, getting injections. But he had heard that I'd helped someone else in the same situation eliminate all pain and avoid surgery
Wow.
using my new technique. And so he came, I worked with him for several days. He left pain free. He came again after several world trips photographing birds all over the world, and he came back and we got rid of the rest of his pain.
Wow.
And at that point, I was still working the W-2 job, but I was able to get him into my schedule and kind of work through that. And he went home pain free, slipped and tripped on some water and tore up his shoulder.
Oh,
And MRI and doctors all said he had to have surgery. And so he came back, this was in April of 2018, and they said, he couldn't do anything, couldn't lift his arm past his waist. And within 3 days, we got his arm completely overhead again with minimal pain.
Wow.
So he hired me on the spot to go travel with him and his partner for 6 months around the world, coaching him on my process, which I call the PABR method.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm saying this is different, because I was working a W-2 job. Then I
Sure.
became kind of W-2 contractor for
Yep.
six
Kind of a
months with
shift into it.
him.
Yep.
And then once I finished that, came back from Antarctica and decided to become an entrepreneur. So this wasn't something in the making like normal people. I was
Sure.
stagnant. I was frustrated. I wasn't happy in life because I just felt like I wasn't really contributing on a grander
Mhm.
scale, which led to this transition position, which then when I came back, I said, there's no way I can go back to a W-2. I
Gotcha.
have to try to make it. And it's very different from a lot of people also, because they're used to working a W-2, doing a side hustle, and it becomes their
Yep.
main gig. I just said,
Right.
cold turkey, here I go, make it
Yep.
or break it. No income for a while, but I'm gonna try it.
Wow.
So yeah,
So, wow,
yeah,
that's quite the story there.
yeah.
With that, and I think you had said you had just got back from Antarctica.
Mhm.
Do you remember the certain date where you got back? Yep, I can't do this anymore. And did you give your 2 weeks, or what was the final exit process, so to speak, from your W-2?
Well, I was working with that. I was flying around the country with that photographer, or around the
Okay.
world with
Oh,
that
okay.
photographer, and I told him when we were on our way to Antarctica, I said, I'm done after this trip,
Gotcha.
the two
Okay.
week trip, and I said, I'm done. I'm heading out of here. And I
Okay.
already had a flight back. And when we got back from Antarctica, then from Argentina into the US,
Wow.
I left and went back to Arizona.
All
So
right.
I was done.
Cool. And how many years ago was that then, Amy? Or how long have you been a full non W-2
Mhm.
employee, I should say?
Yeah, that was at the end of 2018. So
Okay, so
it's been several
four
years
and a half
now.
years, gotcha.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
right. So with
yeah.
that, Amy, I know you said, you kind of got to plateaued, if you will, and
Mhm.
kind of could only go so far and had the, resistance. You were all in, no income, but obviously here you
Mhm.
are, 4.5 years later. But looking back, is there anything you do miss or any regrets from leaving the, W-2 lifestyle, I'll say?
I would say I've always favored the sense of safety and
Mm.
security,
Yeah.
and not having that is a big challenge with being an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
I'm it's just part of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
But part of who I am is always go the harder route, always go with whatever's more challenging, face your fears.
Hmm.
So this is right for me because it's doing exactly what I've always done since I was a little kid, is always take the harder route, in the sense that whatever I fear, I need to push through,
Sure.
because I need to see that I can overcome it and I can achieve it, and it strengthens my resolves when things don't go as I expected, or there's some kind of bad event or whatever's happening.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. On that point, Amy, and maybe kind of on the flip side, where, by the time this airs, we're getting close to 5 years you've been on this entrepreneurial journey. But
Yeah.
on the other side of this, what's been maybe the greatest thing, or what's been the most rewarding of going this entrepreneurial route versus the, day in, day out, drag, if you will, of the W-2 lifestyle?
I would say there's probably two things. One
Yeah.
that many entrepreneurs talk about is kind of the freedom to set your own schedule,
Hmm.
to live a life that you set up. It's not something that's dictated by a boss who tells you you need to be in the office at this time, you can leave at
Yeah.
this time, and who really cares what else you have going on in your life. I can
Yeah.
set my schedule. If I need to go to a doctor's appointment, I just block off that time and I go do it. I don't have to check in with anyone. And I realize that, okay, if I do that, I either don't get income or I just move my
Yeah.
clients to later in the day. But I like that flexibility.
Hmm.
The other aspect of this, I would say, is the people I've met,
Okay.
the relationships I've formed with other entrepreneurs and other people who have businesses and growing their businesses. Those have been invaluable, because I've always been growth minded. I've always been curious and always want to learn the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing. I've always hated being stagnant, and
Sure.
being around people who are very similarly minded and goal oriented has been extremely beneficial. And I know that even though been, I've struggled and I've gone through all the entrepreneur aspects, I can always rely and reach out to people.
Sure. No, makes sense. So now, Amy, for any of my listeners out there, and I've connected with investors, entrepreneurs, and but also people that, well, I have this idea or I have this side hustle, but kind of like you said, back to the security thing, I can't leave my job because of health insurance or that steady paycheck or,
Mhm.
whatever the reason may be. What advice would you give to any of them listening that just feel stuck? Like, yes, I know there's something different out there, but I feel trapped maybe.
I tell them get around different people.
Okay.
So your environment sets up how you think and what you move towards. And if you keep doing the same exact thing, you're going to keep thinking the same way. You're going to keep staying in that rut or wherever you are in life. So if you get around different people who are taking action, who are doing
Mhm.
what you ultimately want to do, it's going to set you up to think differently and it will help you get ideas. So if you feel stuck and you've racked your brain, you can't figure out how to make that shift into being an entrepreneur, get around entrepreneurs because they're going to have ideas of what worked and what didn't work for them, or they
Sure.
might be able to connect you with other people who can help you with that process. But just having that support, sometimes just enough to push someone over the edge to get them to shift into, you know what, I do have enough saved, or yes,
Mhm.
I can make this work, or I can start working on it on the side at night or on the weekends to help me transition.
Yeah.
And some people need that safety net to know that they can do that, especially if they have families and other people relying on them. I can understand that. And
Mhm.
then sometimes you just jump and you
Yeah.
just know, okay, if I jump, I'm going to give it a year. I know I can survive a year and I always have a backup. I can go back to doing what I was doing. And just even telling yourself that, even if it's true or not true, sometimes can get you through that
Sure.
transition.
No, I yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And I think it was a Jim Rohn quote, you are the average of the five people you spend the most time with, or something along those lines. And,
Mm-hmm.
I myself have been in that position, of where maybe I'll just say it's almost like a toxic relationship, your friend, your spouse, your boss, your brother, whomever is kind of holding you back. And it's like, well, I can't cut them out of my life. They're family, they're friends. It's like, well, yeah, but if
Yeah.
they're holding you back, are they really someone you want in your life? And it's probably maybe one of the hardest decisions you have to make to surround yourself around other like-minded people, I should say.
Yeah, and it's true. And I tell people you don't have to cut them out.
Right.
It's just you just don't spend as much time with them and you just spend time with other people.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I hear that often, cut people out, purge people out of your life. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. They're
Maybe cut
still
out's
good
a little bit too
people.
harsh.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
not, I don't mean to harass you, but I hear that often from other entrepreneur coaches who are
Mhm.
kind of guiding people. And I'm like, I like to collect good people. And just
Mhm.
because they're not doing the same exact activities that I'm doing doesn't mean they're good people. It just means they have other
Right.
goals. And again, this is nothing against your choice of words. It's just I do hear that often. So that's why I like to say you never know when someone will come back into your life
Mhm.
and need you or want to follow on your journey. And I can give an example of that a friend of mine just came back into my life and she's looking to leave her W-2 and start a
Wow.
business. And I used to play soccer with her and her husband a long time ago. She worked a job, I worked a job. We were kind of on that same, go to work, go home, sleep, repeat.
Yep.
And now she's looking to change. And we had a conversation just a couple weeks ago about her trying to start this side business so she could have this business to go towards. She's terrified and she's going through all the same things that I did a few years ago. So you just never know how someone may come back into your life and you might be able to help them. And I talked to her exactly about what I'm saying right now. Get around people who are entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
Get around people. And I said, you do not have to give up your friends.
Sure.
Just know you're not going to spend as much time with them. You might fall out of touch. It's still beautiful, whatever you had with them, but you're just shifting your focus to be around different people who are thinking differently, and you just grow your circle. So,
No, makes sense. So
yeah.
now, Amy, as we wrap this up, and I want to again thank you for taking the time out to join my listeners and share your story. But for lack of a better marketing term, I call this the unscrewed moment. Whereas we're going into 2023, is there any new projects you're working on or anything coming up in 2023 that you're excited about? Want to share with my listeners, maybe where to find you and your business and reach out or uh maybe unfortunately they're living with chronic pain and they need to
Yeah.
find a different avenue.
Yeah, sure. So they can reach me. The easiest place is my website, pabrinstitute.com,
Okay.
PABR Institute.com. You can also Google Dr. Amy Novotny and find a lot of resources out there, both free as well as information about how to work with me if you have pain, stress, and insomnia, anxiety, panic. So I just recently launched some video courses.
Oh,
So
cool.
that way, people who are extremely busy, which
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are, that is my clientele. I do work with high performing entrepreneurs,
Okay.
founders, very successful people, who run large companies. But a lot of times, some people are too busy or on different time zones because I do work with people internationally. So
Okay.
having a video only course is a nice way to learn the material I teach and that
Okay.
I help people with to help them guide through. So that's the big thing this year is I've launched a couple courses and more coming up, but that's what we're working on.
All right. Sounds good. And for those listening, I'll have those links and show notes below so you can click on those and check them out at your leisure too. So with that, otherwise Google Dr. Amy Novotny. Amy, thanks again for joining us and sharing your story with my listeners.
Thank you for having me on, John. I appreciate it.